Yeah,
Mandy Wells is the Assistant Diocesan Safeguarding Officer in Training and Pastoral Support. And I asked Mandy, would she be happy to come along and give us a brief talk, really in preparation for the later spring and summer when we start running activities in our churches and churchyards that involve our congregation, but sometimes the wider community, just for us to do some thinking about risk and safeguarding and an opportunity for us to ask Mandy some questions. So thank you very much, Mandy. Over to you.
well, I'm very pleased that I came along to hear about all the wonderful things you're doing. Thank you so much for allowing me to be part of that because it really helps me understand from a safeguarding perspective. Um, and you might not think safeguarding really applies to what you're doing while you're out in the churchyards, but as part of creation care, you understand about caring for the environment, caring about the creatures, caring about the plants, all of the various aspects of creation care. And of course, that includes the people. And where there's people, safeguarding comes into play. So that's safeguarding yourselves while you're out doing all these wonderful things and safeguarding the people that may come along on your trails or may come on a walk through your churchyards, or might come to an event if you've got any spring or summer events planned. And I just wanted to do a bit of sort of reminder, I suppose. In our discussion, Sharon mentioned about risk assessment. So you've got the physical risks of perhaps some churchyards might be difficult, might have a bit more dodgy ground to walk on or rough ground, and you're thinking about physical access to those areas. But you've also got, as I say, people coming along, some that you may know very well, some that you might not know so well. And the safeguarding aspects, the message is still the same, that we're caring for the environment, but we're also caring for the people that come along. And I did ask someone in training once what they thought safeguarding means. Safeguarding is a funny word. And this person that I remember said it's being very careful, so full of care. And I quite like that idea that we're full of care for each other as well as our environment. And just a reminder about the 4 Rs. You know, if any of you've done safeguarding training, you might have heard about the 4 Rs. And we our team and various other people around often wear these lanyards with 4 Rs written on. Um, and the first thing that you think of with the 4 Rs, the first R stands for recognise. So if you're happily going along with your event, you've done your risk assessment, you've got a good crowd turned out. With safeguarding, you have to recognise when something isn't quite right. So you've got your eyes and ears open, and just taking notice of people and having an awareness that if you recognize that something isn't quite right. And then, so that's the first tick that you've recognized something's not right. And then hopefully then the sensible second R is that you respond to that maybe situation, maybe conversation, maybe somebody tells you something different, difficult or unusual perhaps. And then you need to make a record. So the third R is a record of what you've seen or what you've been told, perhaps. And the fourth thing is that you refer. So the 4 Rs are recognise, respond, record, and refer. And that's just a helpful reminder, really, of none of us like being in a safeguarding situation of something that's worrying, but those 4 Rs do help structure how we respond in a way. And in most cases, that referral will go to your parish safeguarding officer. So hopefully most of you, all of you will know who your parish safeguarding officer is. If that person isn't available or if you haven't got a parish safeguarding officer, then your incumbent or your oversight minister or whatever type of member of clergy you have access to, you can refer to them and then they will decide whether it needs to be referred on to the safeguarding team for the diocese. And I would emphasise that the safeguarding team aren't just there for police emergency situations. We're very much there for questions and queries as well. So if you do have a question and there isn't a PSO available, there isn't anyone else available, then you yourselves can contact the diocesan safeguarding team. Rosie knows because she answers the phone in the ops team that very often we get calls from people just having a question about something that might have happened. And then we're able to advise and maybe ask for more information, or sometimes just to reassure that we don't need to do anything further. So I think that's, the basis of what the message is around safeguarding, that we want to feel your activities and your trails are safe places for people to come to. And some people mentioned working with the school, so you may have children and young people that are attracted along to join in. And obviously, children and young people are classed as vulnerable, so you're dealing with vulnerable young people, and you also may have vulnerable adults attending as well. So the whole range of safeguarding applies if you have concerns. And if you're having an event and you do a risk assessment, then you want to consider what might happen. Again, I was listening to someone reporting a great idea of an Easter egg trail in the churchyard. And what they'd forgotten was that there was a sort of hidden exit to the churchyard at the bottom. So some of the children went off happily to do their Easter egg hunt, and then half of them disappeared down this exit that the risk assessment hadn't included, and there wasn't anyone guarding the gate. So fortunately, no one was hurt in that story. But in hindsight, they thought, well, we should have put someone on that gate to make sure the children didn't run down that way. So there's little things like that, that if you were adding safeguarding aspects to your risk assessment, it may be about exits, it might be about numbers of helpers. If you had a large, that would be lovely to have a coach load of people arrive to do your trails. If you have a larger number, then you're going to need some helpers. You don't want to be faced with all of those people on your own. And maybe a mobile phone if many of the churches haven't got signal. So considering if someone's got a landline access in an emergency situation, how could you contact the emergency services? So I think that's basically in a nutshell the sort of advice around safeguarding. Certainly the 4 Rs to respond, to recognise that something's not right, that you respond to that person or that group of people, and then you make a record and refer it, and that the safeguarding team are there if you want to ask questions, even if you wanted just to look at your risk assessment beforehand. We did have a parish that said last summer they were going to do a barbecue, which is great. They sent the risk assessment in, and they were alongside the barbecue. They were going to serve alcohol, and they were also having an inflatable swimming pool, and they were inviting families. So they had the whole range of different people, access to swimming pool, a barbecue, and alcohol, which was quite quite a combination. So they asked us to look at their risk assessment, and we did, and they've done it very well. So if you ever need someone to glance over a risk assessment, we could do that as well. And I wanted to give some time for you to ask questions if anything's come up for you, or if it's sort of what I've said has made you think of anything particular. Or if you thought that safeguarding doesn't apply to us because we're just out in the churchyard.
While you're thinking of your questions for Mandy, I just want to remind you that the Caring for God's Acre Action Pack has a big section called Involving People, Section D. And in Section D, there's a really good risk assessment. You just need to add safeguarding to the bottom with lots of prompts to help you complete a risk assessment. So that I'll put a link to that in the newsletter. It's the Caring for God's Acre.
It's really good to have some examples within the risk assessment? Because if you're given a blank piece of paper to start from,
Mm,
that's
yeah,
often very daunting. So
yes.
having some suggestions of the sections to complete. And who's responsible for what sort of things as well on the day? I would say the named person um, to include on your risk assessments. Does anyone have any questions? No? Got it covered, Fiona?
Fiona.
It's not so much a question, really, in a way. Well, I suppose it is. Um, the only thing we've really done with children out in the churchyard so far was it was a messy church event where we were taking them out for one of the activities to look for various animals and plants out in the churchyard. Um, but as far as safeguarding went, because they always have to have a responsible adult with them at messy church, we were well, the responsible adult was responsible for them were going out in the churchyard as well. So we didn't find too much of a safeguarding problem with that one.
No, that's good. But I
And
suppose if there were any accidents or if, um, with the adults or the child, then it would just be someone to respond to that.
yeah, I mean, we did issue the responsible adults with a list of things that were, risks out in the churchyard, things to
Good.
look out for and things to be aware of. So yeah, okay. So and the same would happen really with we do the church's count on nature, and we always try to get the youngsters involved, but we do tend to say do it as a family. And we have a sheet there for families to pick up and go if they want to. And again, that's a bit of a cop out, really, because then we're not responsible for
No, that's all
children.
right. You're covering yourself there.
Yeah.
One of the things that might come up, I was thinking about is photographs. So, photo consent sometimes for certain families may have reasons why they don't want their child to be in a photograph or part of a group photo. So, that's sort of loosely linked to safeguarding that you respect the family's wishes about, well, anyone's wishes about having a photograph, particularly for publicity. Um, so being very clear what photos are going to be taken and allowing people to consent to photos as well.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Randy.
Pleasure. And I was thinking, Sharon, that as your meetings go on, if you have any safeguarding questions, I'm quite happy to come back and address the questions again.
Thank you, Mandy. That's great. That's really generous. That would be really useful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to show you this again. So this is the Churchyard and Burial Ground Action Pack by Caring for God's Acre. You can buy this folder for £30 or you can download the information that it contains for free. And it has a big section called Involving People that has the section on risk assessment. But actually, the risk assessment in the printed folder is better than the one that you download. So I will scan this risk assessment and we'll work out how to attach it to the newsletter because it's really useful. I used it last year for our church's Count on Nature event at St. Just, and it was good because it had some prompts to help fill in the form. Okay. Now I want to introduce you to Benedek Dalglish from Cornwall Council. Welcome, Benedek. He's
Thank you.
joining us to speak about Cornwall Council's nature recovery strategy and give some ideas about how our work on activities such as Churches Count on Nature, which reminds me, Churches Count on Nature's website is now available for people to register events they're running during Beautiful Burial Ground Week, and how that supports the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly nature recovery work. So over to you, Benedict. And
Thank
we
you,
can see
Sharon.
your slides.
Nice. And can you all see your own faces out of interest? Because I can see the cameras coming back at me, but that's not, you can too, because that can be annoying to see your own faces, but delayed. Apologies for that if that's the case. Anyway, well, that's the session. But yeah, thank you for having me. And this is a kind of a repeated presentation from the one we gave to the general meeting of the diocese a few weeks ago. And it's just an overall sort of summary of our team, the nature recovery team at Cornwall Council. and yeah, how it kind of aligns to the work. And first off, we always like to start these things with just a sense of why nature is important. I think you guys are all pretty well, you're part of the team. But they're kind of the things we draw out is there's the intrinsic bit of nature, the kind of more classically spiritual part of nature having its own value. And then there's also the very clear kind of economic and real benefits that nature provides. So also part of our work is how to really establish kind of an understanding of why we need nature in very clear capitalist terms, essentially, and like how it supports all of our kind of daily functions. So those are the two strands that we need nature for. And of course, you guys are, as being kind of engaged members of the church, you're engaged in this work, which is great. And then just to kind of have the wider context that also the Church of England has got some really good policies around it. And Bishop Graham there is the lead bishop apparently for environment access within the church. So it's nice to kind of see that we are all a part of things, and there are various institutions releasing plans to kind of meet the challenge of climate change and nature decline. And in the Church Commissioner's action plan, these three kind of approaches are quite good, and we also echo that in Cornwall Council in terms of how we kind of meet this. And it's kind of interesting to see how it applies to your own church or communities, like how we design our processes to align with nature, how we engage with people. So like the previous session, how we really speak to our community, and how we get investment. And that's another big part of our work, is how to get private money into nature action, really. And we have this Pledge for Nature, which we'll come back to, maybe some of you have heard of, but Sharon Hafley has given us a Pledge for Nature. So this is like a platform that is a way for people in Cornwall to kind of feel like, again, they're part of something. And this is a pledge from which you are all contributing to. And we're grateful for Sharon for the posting. And it's, again, kind of getting people on side and really getting stakeholders involved. And a lot of our work currently really surrounds this central idea of the nature recovery strategy. So in the council on the left, you have this environmental growth strategy. So that's the kind of policy background of where we come from as a council, and what we're aspiring to do over the next 40 years. And so the local nature recovery strategy, the green document, and then the blue one, which is the marine nature recovery framework, which is an extension on the land-based strategies, which is in green. That's everything until the low water mark. And the marine nature recovery framework is then the idea of how nature also is interconnected, and we need to be thinking about what's happening beyond the low water mark. And so that reaches out towards 12 marine nautical miles, rather. And also within the council in the bottom is this Grow Nature Action Plan. So it's, again, we're sort of looking at how we can establish these changes and put them into our own processes to really honour climate change. And so what is the strategy itself? It's essentially a way to break down what, where, and how we do anything for nature. So on the list, that those priorities, they basically allocate ways to take action across Cornwall. So we'll go through some mapping in a second, but those are the really top level priorities of what the focuses are we want to bring to people. And the idea of the strategy is then it provides a way to break each one of those priorities down with certain actions, sub-priorities and actions, so that we can really essentially make ecology more approachable and interpretable to the every person, from community individuals up to organizations who don't necessarily have much of a nature background, but they're just ways that we can then try and make these more applicable and for everyone to do their part. And so there's for the local nature recovery strategy, there's these two aspects. We have the document, which is the green thing in the previous slide, and then we have the mapping. So there's the written down kind of information of all the priorities and all the various actions, and the mapping here is kind of a spatial allocation. So you can look across a map of Cornwall, and actually the whole every local authority across England has their own version of this. But you can find your own local place, and you can see what the strategy has to say about your particular area. So for the purposes of this call, we've been looking at a look at two of the churches. So this is the slightly confusing slide for St Ologin Church, Iluggan, which is in the middle there. You can just see behind the colour. And so this is what the mapping platform looks like. It's sort of different colours that are overlaid onto a normal base map. So there's a little address bar, and you can find anywhere within Cornwall, or just click and drag around. And here we can see there's sort of two colours associated with the Illoggan Church kind of area. So you've got in green, in brown. So the brown is towns and villages. So that's one of the priorities. And the green is trees and woodland scrub. So I'm going to go change my screen to show the mapping in practice. So here we are, we can zoom in and out. And so we have these kind of two particular priorities that are highlighted for Illoggan Church. And when you click anywhere, you'll get this little box here. I'll move you. And so this basically gives an indication as to what what the strategy recommends you do. So here, the top priority is management and enhancement of existing woodland and scrub mosaics. And the preferred action is to improve structure and diversity of existing woods. So these areas are going to be wooded. And if you scroll down here, it's got kind of other associated actions that are recommended by the strategy, essentially, like essentially management of habitats. And then in the brown would be the urban version. So that, again, these are both sort of valid in the area. And this particular priority is to bring nature into towns and villages. And it's around managing green space. And there's other actions that you can take sort of if you scroll down. And we'll go, if you click on the click here to find the preferred habitat, it'll show you a page like this. So for Illoggan Church, because there are two different priorities highlighted within that particular parcel of land. On the left is the nature into towns and villages, and on the right is the scrubs and mosaics. When it says priority number 22 and number 1, they're not sort of hierarchical. They're both as valid as each other. And this is just, these are taken from the strategy, and it just indicates what it looks like when you go into it. So if we clicked on our bit on the church and it said towns and villages, action 71, and these are the sub actions. So it's just ways to kind of know a bit more of what to do and what is going to be helpful, particularly in the local area. And that's part of also why it's really good to get more data, for example, in the church's Count for Nature, because the whole strategy is designed such that any kind of intervention we do for nature, it helps align everything in a way that makes it more interconnected. The kind of tagline is bigger, better, and more joined up. And so if we make sure to follow the strategy as far as helpful as we can, it means that anything we do has a greater impact, and there's more connectivity between the various habitats. And that's just an example then of the kind of the home page of Priority 22, Town and Village Green Space. And the other part of the sort of nature strategy that is designed to be a support is the focus species recovery matrix. And that's it's available again on the Let's Talk website. But again, so we kind of take a habitat focus for the general strategy. And then this document highlights, I think, 120 target species, which each habitat also supports. So if you find these particular species in your church Count for Nature, you can find this document and it will give you some recommended actions as to how to support those specifically. And those are just like species that we've prioritized to have particular actions for. Again, just to have the kind of greatest impact for nature. And then the second example of the mapping is to look at St. Columb Church. And here you'll notice there's no priority on the actual land, because there isn't. It's not across the whole of Cornwall. It's only in the key places which the mapping identifies. But even in this case, you can see around the area. So we have blue rivers and wetlands. We have this kind of pink, that's heath and moor mosaics. So you can still look at what's in the area and then look at the strategy and see what it says for those particular priorities, and then see what you can work with, basically. Because all work for nature is good, and it's designed to be a kind of a guide, not like a prescription of what anyone should do in a particular place. And so that's the terrestrial version. That's the local nature recovery strategy in green, and this is the blue version, just to sort of give a nod to how important the marine part of it is. And it works in the same way, but for the marine side, there are these 10 priorities. So you've got a mixture of habitats and species on the bottom left. And again, it's just trying to integrate both approaches together. So how can we make sure that water is not forgotten when it comes to doing things for nature? So there's 3 main projects happening across Cornwall to give kind of a wider context of what's happening in the sector. and these three are led by external partners, not by us. But they are worth kind of looking into, finding out more about, because some of your churches may well fall under the areas that these places that these projects target. The general idea of these is they're looking for landscape scale change. So it's really breaking sort of the old habit of just going site by site, very specific, kind of protecting nature, and far more about how can we create a thriving landscape of a mosaic of habitats, and then get people really on side in a more collective effort. And that is partly what we see ourselves as a council. What we're trying to do is to create more partnerships like that, and how can we really support people to, again, like things through the Pledge for Nature, or like delivery partnerships, or the local nature partnership is something that the Cornwall Council is kind of holds various ways to bring people together, and to really make the recovery strategy, to deliver on it, to make it a truth, make it a reality. And so what could we maybe ask you guys to do as and me, anyone who's resident here in Cornwall, is to have a look, go online. I'll share the website after as part of these slides. And you can look at the document and the maps, and to see what's in your church or your garden or your local park, and just sort of see what inspires you. They have this platform called the Pledge for Nature, and I'll again come back to that. But it would suggest, if you are willing to make a pledge for nature, and sort of declare what work you're doing. And if we're looking at any private funding, or any companies who are looking to do any kind of investment, point them towards us. So I'll skip a couple of slides forward, or come back to that in slides, which will make more sense when I talk about investment. But another thing that we can do as residents is remember that the Forest for Cornwall team exists and has funding to plant trees. So, for example, on your churches or in the local schools, this is the team that I'm more directly a part of, and it's a very successful team. We have quite a good funding model, and so we're able to support tree planting projects, and kind of bring volunteers in, and it's a really good kind of powerful offer, which in of itself is going well. Basically, it's got good partnership working across the sector, and it's one of the models where we're managing to really get trees in the ground, and it's because people are supportive, actually. And it's for Cornwall being one of the least wooded counties of all of England, we're doing really good work to change that. These are three extra little sort of parts of our team, things that we run as a team. So in the top right, there's this Pledge for Nature. And this is basically a map where we're trying to get people to declare what they're doing, where they're doing it. And it's again on the same website as our general Let's Talk Cornwall website. But this is where the pledge that Sharon made for the Diocese of Truro is hosted. And again, you can look at it and see what's happening around you. But please do make a pledge. And it's again just kind of for more public visibility. And then the other two on the left side and the bottom right side. So on the left side is this Cornwall Climate and Nature Crowdfunder, and this is a funding offering that we, as the council, offer with Crowdfunder, and it's basically a match project funding offer for anything related to carbon or nature. It's really broad, actually, but if they have any initiatives that need money, and you have some ability to back half of it, so we can back the other half. It's really good to keep in mind and share for anyone who isn't aware of it. And yeah, the criteria are quite loose, so as long as sort of it seems justifiable, you'll likely be successful. And in the bottom right is the Cornwall's and Isles of Scilly Sustainability Awards. So they've been running for about 25 years now. And if you would like to come along, they're in December, and they exist to basically celebrate what is happening in Cornwall. Again, for anything related to kind of lower carbon or nature benefits, the award's going to change a bit each year. But in the right is the 2025 categories, so it's like sustainability or nature recovery or circular economy. So again, that's just a way of helping people feel supported and part of something, and it's nice to kind of get some recognition for that. So also, I think in the 1st of May, we're opening nominations for this year. So if you would like to nominate yourselves or someone please do. And I mentioned a bit about this idea of investing in nature. And so one of our other offerings as a nature recovery team is a platform where we're trying to get more investment into local nature in Cornwall. So LINK is Local Investment in Nature Cornwall. And again, this is another website. And you can go on and see what local projects are happening. So it's quite interesting just to look at as a person who's interested in what's out there because you can browse through projects and see what people are up to. And it gives the opportunity to donate and to essentially fund and support these really good works. And if you have any requirements for anything like carbon credits or BNG, which is biodiversity net gain, those things are a bit more technical, but this platform also serves the sort of more industrial level of planners, basically any developments who need to get their offsets, and we can also offer that. And that's just a list when we share these slides of all the various resources that we offer. So I won't go through them, but we've touched on them all. But it's kind of a nice little resource. Oh, I didn't mean to click that. And lastly, get involved. We have an emailing list and social media and a newsletter. So for ways to kind of keep in touch with what we're getting up to as a team and what's happening in the sector, please do sign up. And there's also a Forest of Cornwall newsletter. So every couple of months we send those periodicals out. And we also have Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn if anyone's like to give us a like and a follow. But yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Benedict. Can you unshare and then it will be easier to see everyone and their question. Thank you for that. Very interesting. Does anybody have any questions for Benedict? Shelley?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask if you have any contacts on getting sort of groups of volunteers that can help, because I'm part of a rewilding project and we do struggle to get volunteers within our parish. I'm in Luxillian. We every so often we think, well, we could do with a large number of volunteers that would be there for the day and then to do a job of work like bramble clearance or something. And I just wondered if you had contacts or a way of getting that group of people.
I mean, we often signpost towards Cormac, who are good at they're kind of running volunteer days. So I can give you their email,
Right.
and I'll maybe put that in the chat, or I'll double check actually. I think I've got a guess, but I'm not certain that's the right email. So I'll get Sharon to share that after.
Okay.
Yep.
The other thing is friends of groups. If you have any local friends of groups, they're often pretty helpful to engage. I think there is a Friends of Luxillian. If you're familiar with them already.
There's a Friends of Luxillian Valley.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they're in the same situation as we are.
Yeah. Okay. Just getting more boots on the ground.
Yeah. There's also the Cornwall Volunteer Service.
Yeah, there is.
Valley. So they're a volunteer matching service. So you can contact them through their website and see what support they can provide you in drumming up volunteers. Yeah.
Okay.
Andrew Stott, you had your hand up.
Yeah, that was very, very good, Benedict. I was particularly interested to hear that you're involved with a biodiversity net gain market. I think that's a great idea because it should produce revenue for you. Yeah. The other question I had was, I assume you're inputting into neighbourhood plan creation at the moment, neighbourhood plans, and that you are a consultee for planning applications generally.
Certainly inputting into neighbourhood plans, or kind of on more kind of a consultee basis. And so what was the second part?
Any planning application that was a land take, it occurs to me that you ought to be a consultee. Whether or not you are a formal consultee or not, I don't know, but it occurs to me you should be.
Yeah, right. Yes, we aren't formally, but I think that's part of the reason for the local nature recovery strategy. So then there's that has to be followed as part of planning. So that there's the kind of spatial allocation and the local plan in Cornwall. That is sort of inherently then taken into account.
Thank you.
Well, are there any other questions? Andrew Hill.
Yeah, I noticed improving water quality is one of your big aims, and the water companies haven't had the best publicity. in recent years.
Yeah.
South West Water amongst them. Comment?
It's definitely like a focus area. I mean, I don't know how much you follow sort of the local politics, but Lee Frost is the current leader of Cornwall Council, and it's one of his sort of administration's key like policies is cleaning rivers and seas. So there was a kind of summit hosted a few weeks ago, actually released in the same week as the documentary, Dirty Waters documentary? Sort of happenstantly. And so as a result of that, they're looking to draft an action plan to meet it. So there's action and awareness, and also huge systemic barriers as to why this has happened in the first place, and sort of central government levels of investment required to change the infrastructure. So it's definitely kind of a balancing act of there's a lot of desire for change, and that it's getting a lot of attention, and these things will be slow to respond as well. But I think that's part of the kind of the main basis of us as a team, and why it's really good to plant more trees, for example, or gain healthier habitats, because any functioning habitat essentially cleans water. And there's quite a cool policy from not policy, like a project led by Plant One, who are quite a good CIC around tree planting, and they're leading a thing called No Trees, No Seas, and they're really linking together like healthy trees alongside rivers, and how there's a real relationship between healthy forest alongside water or within catchment areas, and fish populations. So we're trusting to do our bit for nature, and it will do its bit for us. In terms of the systemic barriers, I think you'd have to speak to someone higher at the council than me to really get a satisfying answer.
Okay, thank you,
Benedict. Jess, did you have a question?
Hi, yeah, I did. Thank you for your talk. That was really interesting. My question was just kind of with regards to the LNRS. I know the government were kind of, putting it forward as very much kind of it was going to be done in collaboration with local stakeholders and things like that, community groups. But I was just kind of wondering how, I know you said about kind of, the records that people do from like Churchyard Council bio blitzes or whatever kind of feed into the LNRS, but I was just wondering how that process works kind of in terms of like if things don't work or if things aren't appropriate, because I know that like for example, one of the things you said was that like woodland creation or whatever, like obviously in a churchyard that's not going to be appropriate. So I was just wondering kind of how the process works in terms of like us on the ground feeding that back to the LNRS, and then what that would kind of be done with that information, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean the whole kind of the timeline of the LNRS is to be renewed every. I think it's got quite a wide timeline, but between 3 and 10 years it'll be refreshed, and so rewritten and remapped. And so for any kind of any data that's put in will basically find its way towards ERCIS, which is the local record centre. And it's a collaboration between ERCIS and the Uni of Exeter and Cornwall Council, which is where the mapping comes from. And yeah, I think that once we have in that second cycle of NRS, we'll have more feedback and more understanding of how it has been used in practice, and sort of where it's gone well, where it's not gone well. So there was quite a lot of engagement to develop it in the first time, and then we'll do the same again the second time. And like that includes just kind of holding local communities. I think if there are things that do come up and seem very wrong, then do reach out to us, because the more feedback that is, the merrier. It's really helpful. But I think a lot of it is back to that idea of the LNRS is a guide, not a prescription. So it's not kind of requiring this to be done, and this is the only thing that can be done in the area. But it's if you're there and it feels like an appropriate action, is the best one to take, probably.
Thank you for that, Benedict. I just want to follow up on something that Jess said, because Jess is actually joining us from another county, so she's in Cornwall with us. Just a large number of our churches in Cornwall are in woodland, and have a lot of trees within their churchyard grounds, and are often connected to areas of woodland, outside. the churchyard. And that's one of the reasons why that map is so useful for us, because a church, for example, might be thinking, I really want to create a wildflower meadow in our churchyard. Then when you look on that map, you can see, well, actually, we're probably on ancient woodland soil here. So it might be easier to regenerate woodland flora than moving all the way to open grassland habitat. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Fiona, Fiona, you put up your hand?
Yes, I was just wondering how the data that we collect in the Churches Count on Nature, does that directly feed into you in any way then, Benedict? How can that come to you?
And it would go into us via the Urkis Record Centre, and then that would probably go into the general maps, into when the LRS is being redone. It does also feed into the I didn't actually mention, but the State of Nature report was something that was done in 2019, which is like a general assessment of where nature is at in Cornwall. And we're going to be doing a new, us or somebody's going to be doing a new assessment of where's the State of Nature 2, as it were. So that data will also definitely feed into that. So like, exactly how many butterflies are we finding, as we did 10 years ago, for example. And that's quite a good sort of temperature check on ecological decline, and it means that we can build a stronger argument as to what's working where and what isn't working, because this is how the numbers are fluctuating.
Okay.
Thank you very much for
Thank
that. So if you would join me all in thanking Benedict and Mandy for their splendid talks.
Thank you.
Okay, then. I'm going to come back to Churches Count on Nature in a bit, but first over to Rosie, who might want to tell us what's happening at All Saints Higher Town and give us our notices.
Right, so just about being a creation care champion at All Saints Higher Town. I'm really with the rest of you guys because we are starting our silver survey, and I'm trying to get a member of the PCC to be with me when I do each section. So already we've got quite a lot of work to do with land and nature. So that's mainly going to be our focus, I think, for the time being. And plus we're going to try and do Churches Count on Nature. So that's me. Shall I do the notices now, Sharon?
Yes, please, Rosie.
Okay. Not loads. I'm sorry to keep on banging on about this, but energy footprint tool, deadline 30th of June. Just to say, if you're not sure whether you've done your energy footprint tool, speak to your treasurer, they should know, or speak to me. We are going to be sorting out the prize draw for the heated cushions next week. So those who put in their energy footprint tool before the end of March, you never know, you might be a lucky winner of one of the 3 heated cushions. Sorry, it wasn't soon after the 31st of March, but Easter's kind of got in the way. So we're doing that next week. So look out, and we'll be publicising the winners. Sharon's going to be talking about Churches Count on Nature, but I was just going to say she's probably got something different. But do have a look at the website, because I had a look. There is seriously lots of resources there to find. Spotters guides. They're focusing on swifts this year. Apparently from 1995 there has been a 68 reduction in the UK breeding swift population. So yeah, if you've got any swifts in your churchyard, they'd be interested. There's resources for young people and schools, so do have a look. Just to reiterate what Claire was saying about St. Fiat Church, the festival Slugs and Snails on Saturday. I put the link in the chat. I'm sure they'd be really pleased to see anybody from this group turn up. And finally, I don't know if you saw in our last newsletter that we have got some funding which we can purchase eco church plaques. So if you are working really hard on either your bronze, silver, or maybe even gold, we can actually purchase your eco church plaque for you. It costs £97 each, but obviously that's until the funding runs out. If I said the right words, Sharon.
Good point, Rosie.
So get in there.
Yeah, at the moment, it's for awards delivered in this year.
Yes.
And then if we get to Creation Tide and we haven't spent all of our budget on that, we'll open it up to everyone. So people who had awards in previous years but haven't bought their plaque yet, on a first come, first serve basis, will spend that budget. Yeah. Sorry, Rosie, back to you.
Thank you. No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So our next network gathering is on Thursday, the 28th of May at 10 a.m. So it's later in the month than usual. But at that meeting, we're going to have Harriet Carthy, who's the director of Caring for God's Acre, and she's coming to talk to us specifically about Church's Count on Nature. And I'll ask her to come back to Fiona's question about how does the data move around when we use iNaturalist for Church's Count on Nature. How does it all move around the data network system, and how does it ultimately end up in something called GBIF, which is a global database that ecologists all around the world use. It's quite an ecosystem of databases. So it will be great to hear from Harriet as we prepare for Church's Count on Nature and running activities. As Rosie said, the website has great resources. They're really easy to use. So I ran a 2-hour session at St. Just Church before I started in this job, just using what I downloaded from their website. We had so much fun. We had 2 hours. No one was down on their knees crawling in the grass, looking for different species. We didn't have to be able to name things. We just had to recognize that they were different from each other. And it steps you through working out how species rich the grass in your churchyard is. And we used the Merlin app that listens to bird calls to log the birds that flew through our churchyard during that 2 hours. And we had a lot of laughs. And this year we're bringing a picnic. We're bringing folding seats so that we can have a rest. And we're going to map the trees in our churchyard this year. The other person who will be joining us at the 28th of May meeting is Jo Chamberlain. So she is the head of environment at the National Office. She runs the environment team in the National Office. So she'll be talking to us about the role and work of the national team. So that's in response to, I think it was something raised at a previous meeting by Duncan Petty. He wanted to know more about what the National Church was doing in the environment space. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left and I'm going to end with a blessing. But before I do, I just wanted to ask, did anyone have any questions we haven't been able to get to? Anything that you've thought of since we went around the traps? Maggie Cooper? You're on mute, Maggie.
I rather wanted to ask Benedict about dune habitats, which are a very interesting habitat which you see is being eroded, and just how bad the erosion around the whole of Cornwall is. I think this is something that is just we need to keep an eye on, and obviously up near Bude where I am, this is a big problem. Our beautiful dune habitats. I mean, the orchids that grow on the sand, through the sand. I mean, it's extraordinary. So, yes, I'd be interested to know more about this, really, if you feel any information available, and what the council are doing, how the council are involved, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I would say is the dreaded echo. Is the I can speak over it. Is the Making Space with Sand project? which has been running for the past, nice, thank you, I think 5 or 6 years, and it's coming to an end. But there's, I can put the link in the chat. It's basically kind of identifying particular bits of the coastline around Cornwall, and particularly with the basis of using dunes to reduce impact of climate change. You're nodding your head, so that's that's good. So you're familiar with that. I think that's the biggest action that's been taken really for dunes specifically, and they're also included within the strategy as one of the habitats that factors into the calculations, and it's definitely, I think it is a nature-based solution for increased storms and rising sea levels. They're being looked to more as a way to meet them, as opposed to very expensive hard engineering projects. So DEFRA, for example, are doing much more of a focus towards managed realignment of waterways and sea levels, as opposed to structural defences, and dunes are part of that. So they're definitely increasing in terms of people's awareness of what they can do, and receiving some attention.
Thank you very much, Benedict. Shelley, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's just it's really one for you, really. I can only make the evening meetings. I can't make Thursday mornings. Are they always recorded so that I can catch up on whatever is said?
Yeah, yes, we always record the talk, and the link is put in the newsletter in the section where we say what we did at the network gathering. It's usually just a link.
Okay, right. Okay, I'll look out for that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for all of that. So I'd like to end with a blessing this evening, if I may. So if we just have a moment's silence while we center ourselves. So in St. Just last week, we sang one of my favourite hymns, which is called Now the Green Blade Rises by John MacLeod Campbell Crum. Did anybody else sing Now the Green Blade Rises last week? I think it's popular for Easter. It celebrates the resurrection of Christ through natural imagery, and it made me think of this blessing by Jan Richardson. So it's a blessing that she wrote for us at this time of the year, when the swelling and sprouting of seeds is so very evident. And it's called Blessing the Seed. I should tell you at the outset, this blessing will require you to do some work. First, you must simply let this blessing fall from your hand, as if it were a small thing you could easily let slip through your fingers, as if it were not most precious to you, as if your life did not depend on it. Next, you must trust that this blessing knows where it is going, that it understands the ways of the dark, that it is wise to the season and to the times. Then, and I know this blessing has already asked much of you, it is to be hoped that you will rest and learn that something is at work when all seems still, seems dormant, seems dead. I promise you, this blessing has not abandoned you. I promise you, this blessing is on its way back to you. I promise you, when you least expect it, when you have given up your last hope, this blessing will rise green and whole and new. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. That blessing is by Jan Richardson from a book called Circle of Grace, a book of blessings for the seasons. So thank you all for all the very hard work that you do within your churches and congregations. I meant to mention that Sarah Newman at St Hugh's Quiddiot is just 2 or perhaps 3 clicks away from getting a Silver Eco Church award. So we should give Sarah a round of applause for all that hard work.
Thank you, Sharon.
It's a pleasure. It's very much appreciated.